Sure.
Do you have any update on the decision to withhold delivery of the F-16s?
I do. And I know that my colleagues over at the Department of Defense have already spoken to this, so let me just further confirm. As we have said, we do not believe that it would be in the best interest of the United States to immediately change all of our assistance to Egypt. We are reviewing our obligations under the law and are consulting with Congress about the way forward. Given the current situation in Egypt, we do not believe it is appropriate to move forward with the delivery of F-16s at this time.
So is that like maybe paving the road to determining what happened in Egypt as a coup?
This was a very specific decision made about at the specific time about this specific case. So I would caution you to read further into it.
Okay, and lastly, General Sisi today asked the Egyptian people to give him a mandate to stamp out violence and terror and so on. Are you concerned about his statement and, in fact, the positive response he's receiving from the public?
Well, we have certainly seen General Sisi's speech in which he called for the Egyptian people to take to the streets on Friday against violence. We reiterate our call, which we have done publicly a number of times, as you know, but also in private conversations with him and others on all participants, participants in the process here, that any demonstrations be peaceful. We are concerned that clashes would make it very difficult to reconcile and get ahead of cycles of unrest and instability.
But aren't you concerned that his call for the Egyptian people at this moment of flux to give him a mandate to basically confront what he called violence and terror and so on, that this is paving the road to full military rule in Egypt?
Well, we're concerned about, I think I just said, we're very concerned about the calls, and we're also concerned about that the clashes would make it very difficult to reconcile and get ahead of the cycles of unrest and instability. But I'm not going to get ahead of where we are.
I'm saying about something very specific. He said he wants a mandate to stand out violence and terror, which means to bring to bear the full power of the Egyptian military.
Well, clearly that is something we strongly disagree with, and we remain focused on encouraging the interim government to move towards an inclusive process, which includes elections, civilian elections, and we're monitoring closely steps they're taking to do just that.
What's something that you strongly discourage?
Violence?
No, in response to his last question, I believe you said something about, maybe I misheard you. Can I just ask on the F-16? So this was a specific decision limited to just the transfer of these planes?
Correct.
You're not aware of, or have there been any other pre-approved military or civilian assistance that has been stopped or suspended since July 3rd?
This is a very specific case. I don't have any other information or announcements for you.
Other stuff that was already approved is still going ahead? Is that?
Well, yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes. This was a specific case and a specific decision that was made.
Okay, and then when you talked about, when you were answering the question about General Sisi's calls, you said you're concerned about the calls. So that means that you don't think it's a good idea that he's calling for people to come out in the streets and demonstrate?
Well, I think what we're referring to is kind of calls. We're concerned about the possibility of violence in these cases,
right.
And that's what we're concerned about.
I understand, but you do not think that that this will give him a mandate?
We don't think it will give him a mandate. In what way?
Well, he says that he's saying to the Egyptian people, look, turn out in the streets and you'll give me a mandate to fight terrorism and corruption. You do not agree that this would give him a mandate?
Well, I think our concern is that we, of course, believe in public displays of expression, and we just want them to be peaceful, and our concerns about are when they are potentially turning to violence. In terms of, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
Well, where I'm going with it is that you, in essence, after the whatever it was, the non-coup coup, said, look, democracy is not just elections. There were 20 million, 30 million people in the streets, basically giving him the idea that getting millions of people into the street gives him a mandate.
Okay.
And now you're saying that that's not correct?
I don't think I said any of that. What I'm
Well, yeah,
saying,
you did. I mean, at the back of the time, you said, look, it's not all the there were 20 million. You kept referring back and forth.
No, you're right. I did say that. We still
Okay.
absolutely stand by
So
that.
now when the Army chief, you don't think that you encouraged him in any way to ask for the Egyptian people to come out and show their support for him and his military by saying, by giving credence to the idea that mass demonstrations in the streets give people or take away a mandate from an elected president or give a mandate to a military to oust him?
Well, in this specific case, we're concerned about the possibility of this leading to more violence, and that's our concern. And we saw his remarks, and that's our concern
All right.
about it.
So you're not concerned about the idea, or what was asked in the question, that this could be leading the way for a complete military takeover of Egypt. That's not your concern. Your concern is only in the short term about violence.
Well, Matt, our focus remains, as you know, on encouraging the interim government to take steps, to continue to take steps, I should say, towards electing civilian leadership, taking all of the steps they've laid out they would take. That's where our focus is. This is a specific case where we're concerned about this leading to violence. That's our concern.
Okay. There is no broader concern than that.
I'm not going to get ahead of what hasn't yet happened.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. You're not concerned at all that this might lead to him, the general, saying, "Look, I have a huge mandate, and we're just going to take over, and the hell with this civilian government."
Well, that's speculating. That's a hypothetical that hasn't happened, so I'm not going to speak to that.
Okay.
He has called for protest. That's what I was speaking to.
Okay, and just to be very clear, the only concern you have about these demonstrations that have been called for is the possibility that they might lead to violence.
That is our concern, Matt. Of course, if there was a path that was taken that was not the interim government moving forward on the path they've laid out and elections, that would be of concern. But that's purely a hypothetical at this point.
Okay, but you don't see at this moment it's not a threat to that. His calls are not a threat to the interim government moving forward.
I was not at all suggesting that.
On the proposal of delivery to the Egyptian military, just restricted to the F-16. You said that. But it does not include, let's say, tear gas that has been used. I mean, they did not use the F-16s against the public. But
it includes the F-16s.
Just the F-16. So it
that
does not
what
include American-made tear gas.
I don't have any. There's no other aid or assistance I have to lay out for you today. I'm just cautioning you not to read into this as an indication of anything else.
So it is fine with you if they continue to use American-made tear gas against demonstrators?
Well, Saeed, that's a broad hypothetical point. I'm speaking to the F-16s and the announcement that was made by the Department of Defense today. As we have more announcements on aid and any form of aid, if we do, I'm happy to make them.
Why it was felt it was not appropriate to move forward with the delivery at this time of the F-16s?
This is a decision ultimately made by the President. It was unanimously supported by his national security team. Obviously, they're reviewing case by case, but I don't have any further kind of internal discussion to read out for you and the reasons.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is it because it was felt that, the interim government receiving such aid would send a bad signal to other governments or other militaries who might be considering removing presidents, or was it because it was felt it wasn't good for the United States image to be sending such weapons or such military equipment at this time? I mean, there must have been a reasoning as to why it was felt to be inappropriate.
Well, obviously it was about to be delivered, so there was a timing reason here. That was a big part of the reasoning, and beyond that, I just don't have any more specifics to lay out for you.
Except that this decision could have been made last week. Do you know when it was made?
I don't.
So, in other words, it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything that might have happened yesterday or the day before. Is that what you're saying?
I would not read into it as being related to a single day.
And then just as you feel like you are entitled to seek clarity from the Russians about what they're doing with Mr. Snowden, I hope you understand that we need to seek clarity from you on behalf of...
I always understand that, Matt. Okay. Sometimes there are things I can read out and sometimes there aren't.
Well, I understand that. But, I mean, it would be, if you say something is inappropriate to do at a certain point of time, generally a non-opaque explanation would include the reason why, and I think Joe's question is perfectly valid. And
I'm
basically, you
not
can't
suggesting
say,
it's not.
right, but you cannot say why it's inappropriate. Is that what you're
I
saying?
don't have anything more to read out for you on the reasoning.
Okay, so you can't say why it's inappropriate. So how do we know that it's inappropriate? How do you? There has to be a reason.
A decision was made by the President, by his national security team, not to deliver. Given the events on the ground, we're continuing to review, but I'm cautioning you against reading into what it means in the future or tying it to a specific day.
What
in
it
Egypt.
means in terms of the future, in terms of the overall review?
Correct.
About what happened 3 weeks ago? Okay, well, will someone at the White House, if they're asked, will they be able to say why the President thought it was inappropriate to go ahead with the sale of the transfer of F-16s?
I encourage you to ask them and see if there's more to offer.
And you would, what's your expectation?
I encourage you to ask any
Basically,
question
that the
you
President
choose.
is allowed to make a decision and without giving a reason for it?
Matt, I think
No?
I gave the reason I'm able to provide today.
Has the decision already been communicated to the interim government in Cairo?
I would point you to the Department of Defense on that. They'd be the appropriate source to make to communicate it.
Do you know if there's... It's been... You're not going ahead with it at this time, which leaves open the door that at some point you will go ahead with it. Are you able to tell us whether that's the case?
All I can tell you is the decision was made at this time about what to do regarding the F-16s that were planned to be delivered, but I can't look into a crystal ball in 6 months or a year from now.
There's no timeline attached to this suspension of the delivery of the F-16s then?
Well, they're not being delivered, so it would require that changing, which that would obviously be looking into a crystal ball, and I don't know. I wouldn't venture to do that.
Once there is a permanent government in place, that the U.S. could review that decision?
I just don't want to get ahead. I don't know all the specifics beyond what the announcement was today.
Is it safe to assume that it was not one particular incident that triggered this withholding of deliveries, and it's an accumulation of things over the past, let's say, month?
I would say that is safe to assume.
Just let me follow up. Expression of concern about General Sisi's call. Do you know if that was conveyed directly to him or anyone else?
Well, I believe that my colleagues over at the Department of Defense read out that the Secretary had spoken with him, so I'd point you to them and the specifics on that call.
I'm sorry, Secretary Hagel had
Yeah,
spoken
Secretary Hagel, exactly.
But do you know, did he express concerns about the calls for people to turn out on the streets?
Secretary Hagel?
Yeah.
I would point you to the Department of Defense. I don't have any readout of his specific call.
So they're handling the diplomacy in this now?
He was the last person to speak with
All right,
him
I
this
understand
morning,
that.
so
Okay,
he'd
but
be
other
the
than-
natural person to
Do you know if the same
point you to.
Okay. Do you know if the same message that you just read out on the calls for demonstrations were given by the embassy or by anyone in this building?
Well, we've expressed that concern publicly and privately countless number of times. I don't have a new update about that.